Yesterday, Israeli forces conducted a raid into the Shifa hospital that Hamas called a war crime, accusing Israel of indiscriminately targeting medical workers, patients, and innocent civilians, and they called on the international community to step in and stop this blatant act of aggression. But today, just 24 hours later, Hamas, Qassam, Al Jazeera, and other Palestinian-affiliated media channels have moved on. They're not covering this story at all. Now, we do have some updates, but those are all coming from Israel. They say, according to intelligence, Hamas members, including field commanders, fled to the area of the Shifa hospital, were hiding there, and turned it into a command center from which they managed combat operations. Now, Israel moved through and cleared the Shifa hospital and the tunnels underneath it a few months ago. The hospital was still functioning while Israel was doing that and has continued to function ever since. So that hospital was still in operation. And as Israel continued to move through other areas of the Gaza Strip, the local population became displaced. And they're saying over time, some of these Hamas militants moved back into Shifa, thinking that they would be protected there and somewhat immune from Israeli raids like this. They say the troops eliminated terrorists in close quarters combat and located weapons in the area while avoiding harm to civilians, medical staff, and medical equipment. Thus far, the troops have killed over 50 terrorists and apprehended approximately 180 suspects. The focus of this operation, the high-value target that Israel was going after specifically, was named Faik Mabu, who served as the head of the Special Operations Directorate of Hamas's internal security. Mabu was subsequently killed during the course of this operation. They say the Hamas terrorist organization continues to systematically operate from hospitals and civilian infrastructure and exploit civilians and patients as human shields. The IDF added that Hamas tried to rebuild its base in the hospital and use it as a refuge for fleeing terrorists. We will not allow this and will strike and continue to strike wherever Hamas tries to regain its control. That is it. When you're looking for an update about this major story, that a war crime is being committed, that Israeli forces are going in indiscriminately killing civilians, medical providers, and patients in a hospital, you would expect that to get some traction around the world. And it started to, but then all of the people making those claims essentially fell off. Now, as a little reminder as to what some of these organizations were saying yesterday as this raid was playing out, Hamas on their Telegram channel said that the IDF was targeting the hospital buildings directly with indifference to the patients, medical crews, and displaced people. And then Al Jazeera picked this up in their article. They quoted the Gaza Ministry of Health saying that, quote, anyone who tries to move is targeted by sniper bullets and quadcopters, adding, they fire at anything moving. Doctors and ambulances can't move. So it's understandable when you read that, you think it's an awful situation. People in the hospital are being targeted indiscriminately, doctors, patients, the wounded being shot and killed by Israeli forces, and then anybody who tries to exit the hospital is also being shot by snipers or hunted down by quadcopters. I mean, these are significant claims, right? The idea that any military around the world, no matter where this is happening, enters a hospital indiscriminately, kills doctors, patients, and innocent civilians, and then systematically hunts down everyone who tries to leave, that's a real story that you would think is getting picked up all around the world. Instead, the organizations that put this information out there yesterday are silent on it today. So then starting with the official Hamas press statement yesterday, they put out a lot of allegations here, saying that Israel was moving into the hospital indiscriminately, targeting patients, medical crews, and displaced people, and they called on the international community to step in and stop these egregious crimes. But then nothing after that. Right, March 19th, they're just putting out their normal roll-up of the number of people that are killed, wounded, or missing in Gaza, the number of churches and homes destroyed. Zero follow-up, zero additional information about those very significant claims they levied yesterday against the IDF. And then it's the same for Al Jazeera. They just moved on. They're not covering this anymore. Yesterday, they led their coverage with an article titled, Israeli Forces Storm Gaza's Al-Shifa Hospital. Gaza officials report mounting casualties. This is the article where they talked about drones and snipers hunting people who tried to leave the hospital. Those are serious allegations, but today you go over to their page titled Israel War on Gaza, dedicated to what's happening during this war, and there's just not really anything additional there around these major allegations they put out yesterday. As we scroll down, it takes a while before you'll get to the first thing even somewhat related to Shifa, a live update saying families flee on foot as Israeli army raid on Gaza hospital kills dozens. Remember earlier they were saying that anybody that leaves was shot or targeted by quadcopter, but the only information they have here is from the IDF, right? Saying at least 50 people killed and many more detained in an Israeli raid on Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, but Hamas says aggression against civilians will not work. Nothing additional around these significant claims that civilians are being targeted, that medical workers are being targeted, and the Israeli army is moving into this hospital, firing on everything indiscriminately. Even looking at some of the unofficial media channels like the Gaza Now Telegram channel, they hit on Shifa a little bit, but they kind of just said exactly what Hamas said yesterday. They put out a note saying, quote, "We call on the Arab League, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the United Nations to take action to stop the massacre in Al-Shifa. We warn against continuing to target civilians and medical centers protected by international law. The continued Israeli aggression against Al-Shifa Hospital is an attempt to cover up its failure to achieve its military goals." Then we do have a little bit as well from the Qassam Brigades, the militant arm of Hamas. Really, they just announced they're continuing to engage in firefights with Israeli forces in and around the Shifa hospital complex. Now, you might say this is just the modern attention span, the 24-hour news cycle. It's chaotic, it's a headache, it's hard to keep up with. I got it. We get so focused on one thing, and then a day later, we moved on to something else. But that's not the case with Israeli media. Again, the Palestinian-aligned media has moved on. The Israeli media continues to focus very intensely on these claims coming out of Shifa. So to give you an idea, when you go over to the Jerusalem Post, we've got 3 articles right on their front page focused on the operation in Shifa. Right at the top, troops engaged in shootout with Mahbub before killing him. New details show that was the HVT in Shifa. Down to the left, Israeli troops, special forces continue Shifa operation, kill 30 terrorists. And then one of the most read articles, IDF launches pre-planned op in Gaza Shifa hospital, heavy clashes. It's all over their news. And then it's the same when you go to the IDF Twitter page. This is the focus right now. It is the major event ongoing, and they continue to make updates since they put out the initial information on March 17th saying they were conducting this raid in and around the Shifa hospital. That has been all they've put out. You know, a post talking about coordinating aid drops with a doctor in the area, a picture of the HVT that was successfully eliminated during that raid, a retweet about the operation, videos from Shifa hospital, and then a roll-up of everything that was accomplished during the course of that raid. This is a great example of just the messy information space that's somewhat unique to the war in Gaza. This type of segmentation where Israel continues talking about a story and Hamas and Palestinian media channels just drop it and stop talking about it altogether, that is not necessarily the case in other conflicts, but it's been a theme throughout this one. If we move over to current events in Ukraine, there are regularly channels both in Ukraine and in Russia, kind of semi-official channels, if you will, mill bloggers a lot of times that have access to officials within each government, and they will put out information from the Ukrainian side. They might verify that Russia made advances in a certain region. It's not good news for Ukraine, but it's a Ukrainian source verifying that Russian information, right? And you get the same thing from the Russian side. When Ukraine launched an operation into Belgorod earlier this week, the Russian Ministry of Defense came out and said, nope, we stopped them. There's nothing going on there. Don't worry. And then it was Russian mill bloggers that said, actually, that fighting is still very much ongoing, even though that wasn't good for Russia to hear. That aspect I haven't found that in Gaza. I have not found any occasions where pro-Palestinian sources confirm a statement by the IDF, and I can't find any Israeli statements that confirm statements, comments, or accusations coming from Hamas or Al Jazeera. And this is a major reason why, in my opinion, it's so hard to have a genuine conversation about what's going on in Gaza day in and day out and what the best path forward looks like. I mean, you have people, depending on where they're consuming their media, which side they trust more than the other, are hearing very, very different versions of events for this exact same thing, right? So somebody who is only taking in or only trusts Al Jazeera or Hamas statements, whatever it might be, what they know right now, because there's been no follow-up, is that Israeli forces conducted an illegal raid against the international rule of law into a protected hospital facility where they indiscriminately killed doctors, patients, and innocent civilians, and then anybody who tried to leave was hunted down with quadcopters and sniper rifles. And it ends there. There's no update. That's the story they got. If it's from a source that they trust, that's what they're going with. And then the people getting their information from the Israeli side, which I should say, as it relates to this event, all of the audio, video, pictures, updates, everything is coming from Israel, supporting their version of events. The only thing we have from Hamas at this point is a statement saying bad things happened. But anybody getting their information from Israel looks at this and says a Hamas high-value target was hiding in a hospital behind medical workers, patients, and innocent civilians. When Israel tried to move in to arrest that HVT, they came under fire from people hiding inside of the hospital. Yet throughout all of that, according to Israel, they were able to avoid harm to civilians, medical staff, and medical equipment. Those are two very different versions of the same event. Now, I do think this war is divisive enough around the world that there probably aren't a lot of people that are looking to gather information from both sides to get a better understanding of what's happening day in and day out in Gaza. But even if somebody wanted to around this specific event, they're out of luck. It's not there, right? Israel continues to put out more video, audio, and written information about this Shifa hospital operation, but nothing from Hamas, Al Jazeera, or other Palestinian-affiliated media. From their side, what it looks like at least, is this story is complete. Wrap it up, put a bow on it. No need to address it any further. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if you're interested in this or other national security subjects, be sure to check out our Substack, linked in the description below. Substack's like a mix of a newsletter and a website. You can sign up and get these 3 to 4 articles we're writing straight to your inbox throughout the week. The one we just put out yesterday was titled Mexican Cartels, How the World's Most Powerful Crime Groups Became Militarized Units. It's wild what's going on there south of the border. I'll link the Substack in the description below. Hopefully you find that of value. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.